What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
Welcome back to America Trends. John Krofsik and Larry Rifkin. And John, is the NBA... Oh, wait a minute. Not the NBA. Is the MBA dead? Now, the NBA, I know, is not dead because I watch it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's
and there was a great game on last night, the Celtics and the Lakers. So I know it's not dead.
But you're talking about the Masters.
Not the Masters tournament. I'm talking about the Master's degree in business administration.
Okay, I'm enlightened now.
So, okay, folks, please, we did not kill off the NBA. But MBA programs are seeing a rapid decline in their student base. And, you know, for a long time, John, that was really the coin of the realm. You had to have an MBA to advance in business in America, but evidently that's not the case any longer.
Well, now you got all these colleges cranking out these programs. You got online colleges. You got, so who knows if even the college you're going to is people are going to look at and say, oh yeah, that's
a nice piece of paper. Is it worth whatever it's written on?
Right.
Yeah, I know, because they started flourishing. I mean, you said you could see MBA programs developing everywhere for a period of time.
Yeah.
Almost every street corner, right next to the urgent care clinics.
I think I saw it in Cracker Jack.
Oh, John, let's not go that far. No, but seriously, I mean, obviously there are still these incredible MBAs that you might get from Harvard or Stanford or what have you, but there are many that are really seeing a great decline in their role. And a lot of people are saying they don't want the generalists anymore. They're looking for people who have very specific skills. And John, I think that is so applicable across the board, because even if you were a generalist in communications or you were a generalist in one area or another, today they want things that are very well defined, like data science or supply chain management. They're looking for very specific skills that might do more for you than the MBA.
Well, I also think that because the job market is the way it is, people are just going straight through now. So they're getting an MBA without having any true workplace experience, which kind of, I think, lessens the degree to somebody. I mean, I think experience is important.
Well, there are still those programs that do contour themselves to the working professional looking to advance. Why don't we have this conversation with Dr. David Cadden today on America Trends? Joining us again on America Trends is David Cadden. And whenever we have an issue about business, we turn to him because he has been very involved in business academics at Quinnipiac University and now a professor emeritus there. And I've got to ask you, it really came to my attention when I saw this article in the Wall Street Journal. MBA programs see fall in students, and this seems like a serious fall in the number of students at universities large and small. And David, I thought the MBA was the gold standard. Everybody wanted one.
Well, for many people it was the gold standard, and also depends to a great extent, to where it's from, if it's still a gold standard. But over the last 30 years, it's been subject to vociferous criticism on a number of levels. And I think what you're beginning to see is two things occurring. One, the economy is doing very, very well. And I've been around long enough to remember that every time the economy does very, very well, there's a dip in MBA applications. They begin to rise when the economy is not doing well. And the other, and I think much more telling, is an explosive growth in master specializations in the business area.
Okay, so the MBA, remind us, I mean, for those of us who don't have an MBA, when people had a master's in business administration, was that a roadmap to the top where if you want to be a CEO, that was the degree to have? And what were the bundle of program activities that you were going to be undertaking, and what now, in terms of a more specialized degree, is of greater benefit than that general business degree?
The original MBA, the idea was to prepare you for upper-level management, not necessarily the CEO, unless you were dealing with some of the top 10 MBA programs in the United States. So they basically were designed to give you a general understanding of all of the major activities of business. So there'd be coverage of accounting, there'd be coverage of finance, there'd be coverage of marketing and management. And then depending upon the program, there might be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 specializations in which you would take an additional 3 or 4 courses. And what's happened is the recognition that you really don't learn to be a leader in the classroom. Sometimes the material covered in the MBA class would be far better if you had a number of years of experience in the workplace. For a while there, many people wanted to go directly from an undergraduate degree and get their MBA, either in a shorter length of time or the idea that you could do it in 1.5 or 1 year time frame rather than the 2 or the 4 or 5 years it might take if you were doing it part-time. And I think that slowed down quite a bit. And now what's occurred is a recognition on the part of business that there are particular skills that are very, very highly valued, and that you really wouldn't get those in an MBA program at the depth that they would like to see you have it. So the greatest master specialization today is in accountancy, followed by information systems, and then they go down the line and you cover topic areas such as management science, general management, all the way down. And surprisingly, one of the least covered is marketing.
Really? That would not seem to...
I was absolutely floored by that, and my wife, who taught marketing, was incensed by it.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right given the world that we live in today. But having said that, I mean, you talked about all these programs that developed at one point in time, and I remember seeing, schools large and small, say in the state of Connecticut. You and I both live in the state of Connecticut, and these were schools that were making the MBA so accessible to somebody already in the workplace, and they were holding evening classes, and they were doing it at alternative campuses and so forth. And we're not talking here about Harvard or Wharton. We're talking about a lot of local schools. So even those programs have fallen off, though you think that it is better for somebody to have been out in the workplace for a while and then going back perhaps on a part-time basis.
I think it makes a tremendous difference, not only for the individual, but for the class in total. Because people are able to bring their experiences and be able to have better class discussions of certain topic areas because they've had some exposure in the real world. Sometimes you would get, discussions only with the older students in the class, and the younger students really couldn't keep up and participate because they, no fault of theirs other than they did not have the experience.
So how quickly are universities adapting to what we are seeing? Because this fall is occurring, a lot of it because foreign students aren't coming in the same numbers that they did. And as you said, because the U.S. economy is improving, a lot of people just staying in the work world or perhaps going back for different types of courses that their employer wants to pay for. But you talked about data science, and I was reading about supply chain management. Are various universities really beginning to focus so clearly on topics that seem to be more arcane than the Masters of Business Administration?
Oh, absolutely. And I know that The supply chain management has become an extraordinary, valuable area to pursue, particularly if one follows up and gets certification through the APICS program, the APICS organization. That becomes tremendously valuable. The second largest number of enrollments is information technology, but that can be broken down, and I think one of the areas that you've seen a very large growth in is a field called data analytics, where people are taking a look at, how to utilize computers to manipulate and analyze massive databases for the purpose of improving decision making.
Now, when we look at the cost of a master's degree, we did another podcast on that. Lots of people after the 08-09 collapse figuring, well, if I'm going to make myself, busy during this period when I'm out of the workforce, maybe I can make myself more competitive by going back for a master's degree. But evidently, the rising cost of the MBA is also having this downward impact, and the unwillingness of many millennials to go into debt to get that degree.
Well, again, I'll go back to the fact that if you take a look at, the top-tiered MBA programs, it probably is worth going into debt if you have a good career plan. I think Harvard is a 2-year program, and it's something in the neighborhood of $72,000 a year. But the starting salary, the average starting salary at Harvard is such that, you would be able to meet, your debt coverage on that. I'm not quite sure that's true of many of the other MBA programs.
If a lot of people are saying, well, maybe I won't get an MBA, but I'll go into some of this data analytics or I'll go into supply chain management, I've got to believe that not only the universities that you and I are talking about going into this field, but a lot of these cheaper and shorter alternatives to the 2-year full-time MBA have to be sprouting up. And there are a lot of for-profit organizations that are going to be out there raising their hands saying, we can provide that kind of knowledge for you. Come to us. What would you say to people in terms of trying to figure out what they do as an alternative?
Based on some experience I and my wife have had, I'd caution some degree with respect to the for-profit educational institutions. I would do my homework. Some of them who offer either abbreviated master's programs or certification programs in particular areas can be very, very good, and others are far less so. And I would suggest caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, and let them do their research on the background of the organizations. I think the other thing you're going to see is for people who still want the MBA Pro, they'll probably be looking at it online. Top-tier institutions and many other, institutions are offering programs online.
And how good are those, and how much can they replicate the experience of going and interacting with a professor and other students? What's your reaction to that?
Again, I would investigate into it. I mean, there are some programs that have technologies where classes or subsections of the class would meet and they'd have video interactions with each other. There are some programs that have fairly sophisticated, simulations embedded within the course, and I'm not just talking about the business simulations where you make believe you're running a business. Some of them can be superlative, the online programs, and other programs essentially PowerPoints that are posted up online, and sometimes there might be the professor would have a voice overview of the PowerPoint and not much more than that. So again, it requires the student to carefully investigate what's going on in terms of the quality of the materials that are being presented.
And this change that we're talking about, because this whole idea of full employment has not been around for a long time, and yet GMAC estimates that 7 of every 10 prospective students in North America are considering alternatives to business school to achieve their goals. So I've got to believe that in the work world, the whole idea that you have an MBA or you don't, or you have another paper that says that you're qualified to do something even more specific than that, and having that broad range of skills that you've been exposed to. But how long has this been going on, this movement away? Or are we miscalculating the fact that companies still like to see somebody who has that credential?
I think companies are going to increasingly look at what are the specific skill sets that you're able to demonstrate. And sometimes your education can support that you've had that. So I think, given the numbers, I think over the last 5 years, the MBA grew at, something in the neighborhood of 3%, and the specialized programs grew at 30%. And in some years, they grew at 45%. I think the future holds is that people will be taking some of these specialized courses, but in conjunction, they'll also receive certification in particular areas. Let's go back to supply chain management. The APICS organization certifications in supply chain, and they have several of them, is extraordinarily valuable. So taking a specialized master's program in supply chain and then receiving certification, that's a good boost for your career.
And the MBA was once considered the prerequisite, of course, for climbing the ladder at many American corporations. I'm wondering whether, in fact, we've ever seen any studies about whether those were the great students coming out of the great schools that really made it to the top of the business world. I'm just wondering if the data is there to substantiate the enormous investment that so many have made in getting this particular degree.
There have been a number of studies, and they indicate that in some cases, the top-tier MBA programs are able to position people in the top-tier positions in major organizations. But, sometimes, although this is anecdotal, you want to go back and take a look and say, over the last 30 years, who are some of the organizations that have really had a tremendous impact and changed America, and perhaps even the world, and you take a look at them and you think of Apple. And Steve Jobs was not, did not have a business degree.
Or Bill Gates.
Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard. Elon Musk has an engineering degree. One of the few, I think, that does have a business degree is our happy leader over there at Amazon, Jeff Bezos. But a number of people have, had tremendous impact without having even a business undergraduate degree. So it's not necessarily the be-all and the end-all. And there was a academic who, over the last particularly 25 years, has railed against the standard MBA. And he's located up in McGill University in Canada, Mintzburg, and he has excoriated much of the MBA structure, and he has particularly attacked the case study approach, which is the backbone of Harvard.
Very interesting.
He argued that what that does is that you assume that you know everything you have to know in a 20-page paper about a company, and you can solve their problems. And he says if you go through hundreds or thousands of those during your 2-year program, you become jaded. You don't have that sense that you have to have an intuitive feel for the organization, in-depth exposure to the organization, and you just become a bit of an arrogant pain in the posterior who can take a limited amount of information and say, I can solve all your problems.
I read a really interesting piece in the New York Times, Adam Grant, and of course he's probably the most popular professor at Wharton. And it was about straight A's won't matter in real life. And as a professor emeritus, I really want to ask you, he wrote, when I was in college, I was obsessed over getting straight A's, said Adam Grant. Now that I'm a professor, I watch in dismay when I see students joining the same cult of perfectionism. They think straight A's will provide entree to elite graduate schools and prestigious careers. And then he goes on to talk about Steve Jobs, who pulled a 2.65 GPA. J.K. Rowling had a C average at Exeter. And Martin Luther King Jr. managed only 1A in 4 years at Morehouse College. What have you seen in terms of the correlation between the great students and the great leaders?
There's an old saying is that your A student will be a very good staff person. Your B student will be a very good mid-level manager, and your C student generally winds up being the CEO.
Oh, I had a friend in college who I called Dr. C. Interesting. Now, let me ask you, in terms of business, I mean, we kind of hashed over the MBA, but I saw another article that I thought was quite interesting in BloombergQuint.com, and it said, "Get used to it, America. We're no longer number one." And they went over a lot of statistics about our economy and our business climate, particularly in relation to China. And it said that we've got to get used to not being the top dog. Is that a hard thing for America to even begin to accept?
I think it's going to be an extremely hard bone to chew on. Much in the same way at the beginning of the 20th century, certainly by the 1920s, the British had to accept that they no longer were the dominant political and economic force in the world. So I think we still have a lot of breath left in us, and I think sometimes we can become roused if we're confronted with a significant challenge from outside. My background and my great first love is the area of aerospace, and I could remember as a child being very upset with the fact that I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, but I was always going to be working for the country that was second in every achievement. And eventually we got our motors started, and we did wind up winning the race to the moon. Now, unfortunately, after that, it was sort of, let's kick back, it's Miller time. But I think that given a sufficient challenge, America can rise to the occasion. But I think in some areas we cannot be dominant in every area all the time. So we'd have to accept that some other countries or unions will be able to surpass us in certain measures.
Do you see any business trends that you think are particularly interesting? They may be on the good side or the bad side. I've been reading the millennials are starting to really welcome Generation Z, and so we're now starting to think of the millennials as kind of leading a lot of organizations or units within them, and that wages are on the rise. I mean, what do you see that we should be looking at in the period ahead?
Well, I'd go back and take a look very carefully at the data on rising wages. It seems as though the bump up in rising wages has been at the lower level of the economy. And part of that is the fact that municipalities in some states have raised the minimum wage, and it's affected that. But the overall trend in many areas is that it's going to increase the overall economic inequality in our society, and I would, as a business person, really, really take a look at that, because that has profound deleterious effects, not only on the social fabric, but on the business operation of all industries.
All right. Well, David Cadden, I can't thank you enough for always being available to us here on America Trends.
I can't thank you enough for inviting me.
Absolutely. Very interesting conversation today, primarily fixed on the MBA and other business trends. Thanks again for being part of America Trends.
Hey, Larry.
Yeah. What's up,
I
John?
got some exciting news for you.
Well, let's hear it.
We're part of the MHNR network.
And where can we find that?
That's MHNRnetwork.com.
I'm going there right now.
All right.